Call the Washington County Board of Education meeting to order. I'd like to ask Mr. Waters to lead us in prayer, and please continue standing as Mr. Hammond leads us in our pledge, please.
Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for the sunshine and the heat, Lord. We thank you for you still having your hand on everything and still being in control of everything. Lord, we just ask that you will be with us during this meeting. Give us your wisdom and your knowledge to make the decisions that we need to make, and help direct us how we need to make them. We love you, we praise you, we worship you. In Christ's name, amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a few board members. Yes, and I think Ms. Annette is in Alaska right now, and Mr. Huddlestone's Skyping in on us, so they are with us. Appreciate the mayor showing up tonight. Thank you. First on the agenda is the update on the earned interest revenue. Mr. Boyd.
Recognition of our guests.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have some special guests here from our high schools. We got a state runner-up in softball. We got a 4x800 relay, I think was second or third. And we have a state champion from David Crockett. Appreciate you all coming. I'll turn it over to Mr. Good and Mr. Kite, whichever wants to go first. And
I think we should do it together.
that'd be fine. That'd be great.
Thanks, first of all, for having us tonight. We appreciate the board, Mr. Boyd, for continued support of athletics. I think what you'll see on display tonight, though, it amplifies what a student athlete is and what it takes to be successful. These kids, every word you can think of, right attitude, character, work ethic, all those things together, they're the example of that. They've got coaches that's put them in a position to be successful. And probably something that's left out a lot of time, and over here to celebrate the kids, but the parents. You know, they've bought in, they've supported what we're doing, both at Crockett and at Boone, and I think that's one of the reasons that the kids had the success that they've had. They are very good athletes, they are even better students, and on top of that, they're even better people than that. So the future for them is extremely bright, and once again, thank you guys for continuing sports. What you want to do is just do one at a time. You want to do all of them.
Do them all.
Do them all.
Well, let each coach say something about their group and come up and
Be great. And then bring them up and let's meet them, please.
Softball, we were the Class 4A state runner-up, 35-9-2. Finished the season from April the 2nd till the end of spring fling. We went 23-2, won 19 in a row. But about this group here, and they'll stand up right there, all dressed the same. This group here, great athletes, and people that play against us will tell you that, but they may be better people. And just a great group. We've got 4 seniors that are all going to play somewhere. Macy's going to Virginia Tech, Kaylee and Audrey are going to Johnson University, and Corey's going to Tennessee Wesleyan. We had 2 girls today playing in the College World Series today for Tennessee as too. On that team as well. So a lot of good things with our softball. This group here, really with their backs against the wall, played the best all year. When the money time came, they played their best. And that's what you want from a coach-wise when they're in those pressure situations that they produce. And this group did it every single time. And like I said, better people than they are players in my way I look at it. Makes it easier for me because it's just great people. Great people.
Remind me if I'm wrong, ain't this the same group that went to Little League World Series every year?
Well, a lot of them are. A lot of them are on that group. We were finished 3rd last year in the state tournament, and then 2 years ago we went down as well. So we've been in the state tournament 3 years in a row, and we graduated 4 this year. But we're big on team thing, but one individual thing. Macy here hit 62 home runs in her career, ranks 5th nationally. in the United States.
She had how many in the state tournament?
State tournament. 5 this year in state tournament.
State tournament
So,
alone.
I'm the head coach.
Yeah, our coaching staff back there, Dave Purcell and Mackenzie Ferguson, they do a great job with our kids too, and our kids do a really good job responding to them. Like I said, just a great group, great group. Okay,
Girl,
thanks for having us. Thanks for having
Introduce
us.
yourself, girls.
Yeah, come
Tell us who
on,
you
come
are,
on, come on.
what grade you're in, and what your future
Come on up
is.
here, come on up here.
I wanted to say, after the first game.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of people might have lost faith, but no, they persevered. I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, just tell who you are, what grade you are, and what you're gonna be doing.
I'm Audrey Morehouse. I'm a senior. And I'm going to Johnson University.
I'm Anna Richardson, I'll be a senior, and I don't know.
That's your business.
Lindsay Stroud. I'm a sophomore.
Haley Quisenberry, I was a senior, I'm going to Johnson University.
I'm Macy Masters. I was a senior. And I'm going to Virginia Tech.
I'm Riley Clay, and I was a sophomore.
I'm Sam Hanson. I was a junior. Kylie Bacon. I was a junior.
I'm Kenzie Bacon, and I was a sophomore.
Ava Stahl. I'm a sophomore.
I'm Corey Thompson, I was a senior, I'll be attending Tennessee my senior. Lily Walters, I'm a sophomore. I'm Josie Jenkins, and I'm a junior.
I'm Katie Sparks. And I was a sophomore.
Congratulations.
Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Boyd and his staff, along with the school board, for recognizing our kids. I'd like to thank the parents. I'd like to thank Dr. Davis for all of her support. This is our first individual state champion in the boys since 1999, Brad Kiker. And I have Coach Stillman, who's our head boys coach, along with Coach Wynn, our head girls coach, and they're here to introduce our state champion. So again, thank you guys, and we appreciate all your support.
Good evening, Dr. Boyd, administrative staff, board members, Mr. Mayor, Dr. Davis. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Adrian Wynn, large school 3A discus state champion. Adrian. Adrian had a throw of 158 feet 3 inches to win the title. I've had the good pleasure of having him for 3 years, and Adrian is a very diligent worker. He was very relentless in his goals. He persevered in what he wanted to do. He worked above and beyond, what we could ask for as coaches, and I know that comes from the work ethic that his family has installed in him. I'm very proud of him. I'd also like to introduce his event coach, Coach Cassandra Wynn, who #1 serves as his mom. And his event coach, and we've been fortunate enough to have her 3 years, and she does a good job with all of our students, instilling a pride in them and work ethic and everything that I think that David Crockett in Washington County stands for. Thank you.
Junior?
We got him another year, so.
And Josh told me you was first in shot put, but you also placed
No.
what?
First and discus.
First in
fifth
discus.
shot put.
And fifth in shot put.
Yes, sir.
So, that's great.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
We have a relay.
Is our relay team right? Yeah, I thought he was ready.
Good evening. This is our girls 4x8 team. They placed second in the AAA state championship last week. Over here to my left is Coach Jones. He's been with the team for about 12 years. He started back when I was up there, and so now I get the privilege to continue to coach with him. We have sophomore Kerrigan Lewis, junior Ella Battle, who also placed fourth in the Open 800 by herself. We have freshman Sadie Honeycutt and senior Cameron Wingfield.
Sadie, six.
Sadie was sixth in the 1600.
That's great, awesome.
Yep.
So what was the time?
9:18.
What one?
9:0.
9:06 won it, and it's the fastest time in Tennessee in 8 years. And these guys are the third fastest team ever in the state of Tennessee. What they did is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really
Congratulations,
cool what
Steve.
these girls did.
That's some good
And
split.
Cameron is a senior, and she's heading off to West Point.
Oh, wow.
Oh, congratulations.
Kim is that good first grade teacher.
Is that one of yours?
That's still the deal.
Yes, it is. Very
Okay.
good.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
good job.
Kind of accomplishment doesn't happen by accident, so, you know, as was mentioned, teamwork from parent support, coaches supporting the student athletes, and the work ethic of each of you as student athletes certainly shows by your accomplishment, so congratulations to all of you. And then what I like what Coach Jenkins said, you know, it's highlighting the fact that it's okay and it's certainly better that your best quality is you're a better person than you are an athlete, and that's to be commended.
That's pretty much so. All right, thank you all very much for coming, and hopefully you can stay for the entire meeting and listen to the school board meeting.
Get up and go
But you're welcome,
You are welcome.
Thank you all for coming.
I think you're fine.
Clears the room.
Thank you all again. All right. Next on the agenda is update on our earned interest revenue. Mr. Boyd.
You know, per the board's request, we provided Mr. Story and Mayor Grandy just to get, because of the conversation around the earned interest revenue, and just to have an opportunity to ask any questions about that particular piece of revenue and then maybe where it originates from. Mayor Grandy, Mr. Story.
Mr. Story, didn't mean to leave you out. Thank you for attending too.
Well, I really didn't know what I was going to be asked, so I think I just have to read the right sheet though, but I guess give you a little background on since I've been trustee for my 5th year or second term, you know, the trustee is responsible for running the cash flow or investing the money, pretty much the banker account. And you know, the last year or so, you know, the market hasn't been very kind to us. It's certainly on a rebound now, but if it will stay that way, probably not. But that's where it's going. But so, you know, the job of the trustee is to invest the money in the idle funds, and we partner with a third-party vendor to help us identify our cash flow. Because, you know, money coming in from everywhere you don't know. I know that the school board, you draw a lot of money down for payroll at the end of June, and we do that. I know when the bonds come in, but other funding projects like that. So, you know, we've identified some of those and we know how to structure our investment. We go 18 months or keep it in a cushion and in a high yielding, but pretty much liquid pool. That's where it goes there. So that's kind of what we're tasked with. Now the task of who gets the money doesn't come from our office. You know, that comes from the commission. So, but I heard Dr. Jury say something about the earnings. Yeah, I'll take you back to 2020. We did up to 1.2 million, 1.2. You know, then in 21, 22, you know, we were down to 380-some thousand. And then in 2000, that was in 21 and 22, it was down to 30-some thousand. But the thing that shows up, doesn't show up on here, is what they did. We bought treasury bills, and we hold treasury bills to maturity, so they don't come back to full maturity, and they come back to full strength until at maturity. So the auditors write it down, but you know, they know we hold to maturity because we're not going to sell them and give up the yield on that. You know, I think this year we've done 536,000, but our yields have really changed. You know, I invested you know, $500,000 the other day because I knew that money was going to be need for cash flow in toward the end of June. But we had $5 million there, but I said $500,000, but $5 million there. You know, for example, we had that there at over 5% to the 13th of June. But you know, we've got $10 million sitting out there. It comes due in October that we set up on treasury bills before the rates changed, and it's sitting out there about 0.5%. So we've got other rates in there. We're getting 5% on everything like that. But you know, when you get a 12-month CD at 5.06, you know, you're waiting a year to get that interest income there. So that's kind of the cash flow on the income. But I mean, I said through April we had taken in 536,000. But just today on 2 investments, we had $83,600. So you know, that's showing the difference in the rate. And when you have $20 million in a pool, we've got $20 million in a LGIP pool with the state. The month in April paid $471. If we look back earlier this year, they were still paying, you know, 0.01 or something like that. So you can see how much time has changed over the last 4 or 5 months, 3 or 4 months. So that's. Let me just pause there a minute and see if there was any specific questions that you had for me as a trustee that would not be addressed.
Well, I think the funds for the interest that we draw off the cafeteria food service funds, where it's coming from the state and FD, USDA and stuff like that. You know, there was some, we thought, I mean, at 28,000 or whatever, that we should have been the one to keep at, just because of where it comes from and different things like that. But I know it's not up to you, but that was my biggest question on it. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. The sheet that I got on the cafeteria fund, 143, looks like they had got 15,000 through. That was through April.
Right.
But what we did, we met this morning with Brad, and we looked at the cafeteria accounts. And after, you know, the state auditor, Mark Treese, who's over this area, you know, he said yes, they have to have their interest. So we've agreed in concept. Probably going to start it. We thought we'd get it started earlier. We're probably going to start to make a clean cut just at the end of the year. You'll still be getting the interest the way you were getting, but we're going to take that whole pool of money on cafeteria, nutrition, and everything, and put that in a separate account as earned interest bearing. I checked with them, and they said if they would pay on the interest bearing check account, they could probably pay, this is their words, 3%. But then, as we talked to Belita and Brad today, you know, they think there's some funds out there that they won't be using for a while, because you're looking at about $3 million something in the pool. So if they're going to have $1 million or $2 million that they're going to use for 3 or 6 months, you know, short-term rates are a lot better than long-term. So I said, you know, this could be enough for you to tell me what you want to invest, and that money would go back to a CD, or it'd probably be a CD in this case, rather than because we got it in money market account. It'd be a better yield, and we put it in the name. You know, we'd be the trustee, but it'd be earmarked for. I think we're going to designate that as a cafeteria or a
dietary fund or something.
Yeah, we had some name for it. Judy came up with or something like that. We let her name that since she's getting ready to retire on us. But there's going to be some cafeteria, but it'd be designated to, but that would be set up, and that interest would certainly go back to them.
But I think in answer to your question, the short answer is the comptroller agreed with your interpretation of that, and that interest income needs to stay, and that's fine. But what the work they did this morning is work that will maximize the interest on it.
And I mean, when we kind of put that all independently, and Miss Miss Caitlin moved everything on with our, I mean, we don't anticipate that to stay a big balance. I mean, by the time they get done drawing everything, and they shouldn't, so, but that's the reason why, you know, for myself, I thought that we ought to keep that interest income.
Yeah, some point in time, that, I think her funds is going to go down quite a bit.
Yeah, we'll have to end up
But
going to
I
that.
think that's why Brad brought up the conversation we had that today. And until it is spent, you know, if you know that you're gonna have $1.5 million or even $2 million out of 3 that you're not gonna use, you know, let's tell them that.
Yes,
Make sure still favorable.
Great. Appreciate you looking into that and taking steps to meet with Mr. Hill.
Any other questions?
You may have any questions for him? Thank you all, appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you for taking that. Thank you, Mr. Story.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is Mr. Paul McCall. We appreciate you driving up again to meet with us.
It's not a problem at all. I have, yeah, there we go. Let's don't start with that one. I think that's probably our later conversation. And this one isn't going to be, I mean, you guys know what we're doing. I think the biggest thing, and I mentioned to Mr. Boyd, that just sort of hitting the highlights on, we're just working to develop the athletic, you know, phase 1, and everybody knows that. So I don't really have anything that I can answer any questions, or if there's anything we need to talk about, that's perfectly fine. But wasn't really going to update. We're just working on documents, you know, and working with Southern Bleacher, as you all know, and putting drawings and specs together. The thing I did want to spend a little time, and we could go through as many of these as we want. This is the set that's getting built, you know, for bid. And as we talked about before, you know, putting them all in one package, right? And so that's the way this is developing. And you know, again, we can kind of go through that and sort of hit the highlights. I think the first thing to talk about, so you all know last time we talked about Asbury and pulling that, you know, I know Keith made that suggestion about can our forces do that, and you know, it seems simple enough. So just throwing this out there between Ginger and I, Ginger and you all know now, as we were going through this, I think I might suggest, because I made that suggestion last time, you know, we do that as an alternate, and then now we can see what the value of it is from a general contractor, so it's a standalone price, and then we can decide, you know, you all can decide, you know, whether or not to accept it or, you know, or not. And I think there are 2 other schools that and then just throwing this out there, they could fall into that category too, and those are Fall Branch and Sulphur Springs, because those, and you all have seen sort of what's been proposed, and we can go to those. I did a clicker, sorry. Let's see. Fall Branch is specifically a 2.12 sheet. So just go through. They're in. Sorry, mine. Well, that's Boone, so we're getting into Boone.
Up there's
Yeah.
So, and just to sort of jog your memory here, so, and again, you know, these are pretty simple, you know, the security film and very simple. So we might want to put 3 alternates in there, and you know, have those 3 standalone prices, and then you know, you might take 1 or 2 of them, or all 3 of them, or just see how it shakes out. And of course, I'm always very mindful of, you know, when these projects are that simple, it's not that your maintenance staff can't do those projects. It's just, do they have the time? If they're off doing this, then you know what else is not getting done, right? So, and I don't want to, and so I would look to you all to sort of advise on that as to whether or not, and we got time to make that decision. I'm just kind of bringing that up as, you know, it's an opportunity, you know, possibly to save some money if the timing is right, and if the you know, if the maintenance staff feels that they can do that. So I think those are 3. That was definitely something that I wanted to bring up, and we can go to Sulphur Springs as well. And of course, we touched quite a bit on Asbury last time, so you know, we can look at it again. Sorry, I've got my cheat notes here. Sulphur Springs is a 5.12, so if you want to go there, just to jog your memory.
And while I'm here, I guess you're gonna take those three and put them on the back burner a little bit.
No, they won't be on the back burner. They'll be on the front burner with everything else. It's just where we put them. It might change where we put them in the order of the set, which is no
Okay.
big deal.
Okay.
But, you know, so when we develop the bid form, so there's gonna be an overall, you know, bid that will be everything. And we'll do these as 3 deductible alternates.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I think
I see what you're saying.
that way you start seeing, you can see the pulled out value of that. And of course, the value of doing that on bid day is, if you decide to do that after bid day, you're not gonna get dollar for dollar back, and I think we all know that. You know, they kinda got you. I'm not saying people are dishonest, but they kinda got you at that point, right? So I would advise that we do it that way, just because, you know, those are the simple ones, so you're not gonna save a ton of money, but if you can save some money, there's that option.
How far are you away from developing those bid sheets to send out?
Well, you know, we are really, because of our timeline on the stadiums, the athletic phase 1, those are really kind of we're working them in parallel, but that's really our priority, just from a timing standpoint. And I'm not trying to stand here and tell you guys that security is not important. We all know that it is. But I think we all know that we've got kind of finite dates in terms of, and again, we're going to put those out probably pretty close, in a pretty close time, you know. And I think it's something we should start talking about, is really what is that bid date. And we have talked about it for the athletics. I mean, we're really trying to get these things like end of July, 1st of August, you know, to issue it for bid. And so that bid date is, you know, typically, you know, in a typical project, we'll leave about 4 weeks, you know, for a bid period. There's a lot of contractors, they wait till about the last week and a half, you know, and they want kind of an extension. But, you know, we can, if we hit that date and give plenty of time, I think we could probably do it in less, because, you know, you don't have a lot of, the thing that's going to be complicated, as you've heard us say a bunch, is the site and civil and kind of those utilities kind of issues. But and that alone might warrant that longer bid period. But I would think that we would shoot for, you know, 4 weeks after that. So say we're at August 1 to complete documents, then somewhere around September 1-ish, first week of September, I think we'd be looking to bid, and then probably security upgrades really would be right behind that. So maybe within a couple, 2 to 3 weeks, so pretty close.
Could you go back to Asbury?
Yeah. Asbury is A11.12, so it's toward the end of the set. And this is just a little more developed from what you saw last time with the security film.
But everything you showed us on the rest of them really hadn't changed.
Well, I mean, we're just developing. Yeah, I'm going to talk about 3 schools that have changed, and they're the ones that have more significant kind of physical and aesthetic kind of implications. Those 3 are Boone, Ridgeway, and Lamar. You know, because of the nature of how we have to create the secure vestibule. And to me, Lamar and Ridgeway are kind of. I'm sorry, I'm reading Ginger's notes. Ginger put it on there. I'm sorry, she put Ridgeway.
So
Apologies.
everybody will be entering from the back. All the students will.
Well, and of course, that's a management kind of issue, but we're still talking about putting the film on the other end of that axis too.
Oh, okay, for
Right.
both then.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's just the security film. And again, that stuff's not cheap, you know, but it's not,
Right.
in the
So
big scheme
both.
of things, it's not super expensive, right? So, but yes, and you see there, that's kind of the idea. And that was sort of our low-hanging fruit, you know, y'all don't exactly know the fate of this building and what you're going to do with it. So I think showing a good faith sort of security measure, but not spending a ton of money to do that. I mean, that just makes a lot of sense.
So nobody will be going in maybe except the one with the steps there, because it was gonna be that was what was gonna be expensive, having to go around
Right.
with the ramp and all that.
Well, yeah, but you know, those early, when we had the whole session with Asbury and the school, you know, it was like, there was a lot of program shifts and a lot, you remember, it got to be kind of, it most expensive kind
Yeah,
of
I
piece
think
of
this
the
will be
puzzle.
fine. I think this will be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, and I felt pretty confident that everybody felt pretty good about that after last time, right? So if there's no other, and again, we can look at any of these that you want, but you know, after that, I think the three that, you know, we can start with Ridgeview. That's a 4.12. So there are ones that we had, you know, we have to do a little more work in terms of, you know, it's more than just a vestibule, it's more than just putting film on. So Ridgeview is the one where, you know, we have the existing, you know, where the existing vestibule is, and we're basically building on basically a front and flanking that. So that, you know, this is one of the more involved ones, right? And it's relatively simple. So all we're really talking about doing is taking just trying to match the existing facade that's there now, and we're just bringing it forward. So we have some other drawings. Maybe if you go to the next, or maybe it was back. Sorry. Well, there's somewhere. Sorry. Keep scrolling that way. Yeah, well, it's right. It's there at the top where you see the elevation, and there's also a section drawing too. But it's basically the same elevation. So, you know, where the canopy comes out and the vestibule that you see that's there currently. So that looks much the same. It's just you're dealing with that roof line. There's a point where the truss is sort of truncated and has a flat metal panel there on the front. And in some ways, I felt like this even could kind of help, because then that front piece now kind of matches the same eave condition that everywhere else. So, you know, I think it works pretty well. The only thing is, what we were trying to do is stay off of that existing wall, have the gutter run there, so there's sort of a low roof sort of trough that's going to drain out the sides, and then just pick up this other roof in front of it. And we have the section there somewhere, so maybe scroll back down.
Paul, I think Ms. Huddlestone have a question, please.
Right there to the right.
Had a question in regards to the film. Is that going to be just placed at the entrance to doors, the secondary doors, the doors that lead directly into the front office? Where is that going to be applied?
So that was always our intent, but I believe I heard something from the state where they were talking about putting that on all perimeter, right? Now, I don't know if that's the
With
scope.
new construction, there.
Is that just for new
There's
construction?
some requirement that it has to be in place.
Yeah.
Some kind of ballistic film has to be on.
Right.
on the window.
Yeah, so to answer your question, what we felt like the scope of this project was that it was going to be, you know, we're doing that work in the secure vestibule to create the secure vestibule and leading into the reception area of each school. So that's where the security film was going to be provided. Yes.
And-
Thank you.
Yes, sure.
and just to make a comment on that, I mean, if there are decisions to expand and go to all the glass, I mean, that's a board conversation outside of this design in these projects.
Yeah, feels like it's a different project, right? That you would have to budget for.
Do we envision doing this stuff during the summer, or is this something we can do during school time, or?
Some
I know
of
the projects vary a lot.
They vary a lot, and for that reason, some of them are going to be easier to, you know, because we got to maintain egress, right, and things like that, just in general. So some of them are going to be easier to phase during school than others. So, you know, but I mean, if you think about and we'll get more into that, and you know, I think that decision about how those get phased might be better. I think it's good that we talk about it right now, and it's a great question, but I think once the successful general contractor is on board, then I think, you know, it's a lot their responsibility too, and of course we can give them some direction. And if there are very specific things that can't be done, then they need to know that going into the bid, just because, you know, it might affect how they bid the project. But it's a good question. There are definitely ones that are easier to do than others. And maybe that's for the next conversation, that we really start kind of homing in on maybe there's a priority list that we start developing based on that and how that they would be built and phased.
Right.
So that section was over, sorry, I was just sort of looking past it. It's on the far right, yeah, right there. So you can see that it's sort of schematic at this point, right there. So that's the existing to the left. Sorry, maybe on this section drawing. So that's cut through the new portion of the building and through this is the existing. So that's that flat metal panel fascia that I was talking about on the existing. So we're just continuing that same slope. And again, when it comes down, it matches the eave height and the condition. So I think in many respects, it'll kind of fit into the rest of the school better just because that condition is the same all the way around. So maybe a little bit of a happy accident, but I mean, if we're building out to the front there, take advantage of, trying to make it fit as well as you can.
So all that has to be wired, sprinkled,
Yeah.
everything.
Yep. It's just a new piece of construction, but that.
If it was built on the inside, it wouldn't have to be, right?
Well, I mean, there'd be sprinkler head modifications, and I mean, there would be modifications, but you could argue it'd be less, but I know we had that conversation about how much it compresses, the inside circulation to do it on the inside. That was
This is probably our most overcrowded school. I mean, it's right at where capacity. You're really not taking that much space since you're coming out, are you?
Well, that was the whole idea. We're not
Right.
taking any of that
Uh-huh.
circulation
That's
space
good.
because we're coming out.
Right, that's
So,
good.
yeah.
Because if we went in, we would narrow the hallway.
Right,
Yeah,
I know,
that's
that
right.
would have been,
So that's where we landed there, and I mean, we want to think about it differently. There's time to think differently about it, but I think we were just moving ahead with what I think was sort of the idea that had been discussed. So,
Looking forward to seeing the bids come in on that. Looking forward for the special legislative session to see if we're gonna get any funding coming our way for that, so.
for sure. Bids are nerve-wracking these days.
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you. If you want to go, unless there's any more discussion about that right now, and I'm happy to discuss it more, but we can go to, I would go next to Lamar, and that's A8.12, sorry, they're just sort of the way the sheets stack up. And really Lamar, I just wanted to show you, I think, I know, I wasn't in that meeting, that was Jake and Ginger that was meeting, and I know a lot of these administrators are very proud of their schools, and again, as we've told you guys from day one, the schools here are very well maintained and among the best that we've ever seen in the system, so I think that can't be said enough and commended enough. But, so this is one where it's not a lot of aesthetic change, but it was the one where you're still under the roof outside, but you're building that secure vestibule outboard of that. So there are, I think Ginger put the perspective drawing in there too, so, and an elevation. So it's basically just matching that same storefront system. I mean, this is the school that has that red storefront. And yeah, you can see over here, kind of more what that, it's just tucking in underneath that sort of portico that already exists. It's going to match the same color and, mullion pattern of the existing, and it just gets built out there. So it's built out into that space, but it matches it and fits it. I mean, pretty simple, not a ton of, design. It's just kind of matching what's there. So, and if there's no questions about that, we can go to Boone, where, we've had a lot of conversation. So if you compare the high schools, we all know that you can go to Crockett, there's a good sense of where the entry is, right? And I'm not trying to make this project more than it needs to be. We know that we're trying to do a secure vestibule, but since we're building out a secure vestibule, entry is not real obvious, and everybody knows there's a big sign that has been put up above tell people where the entry is. So, and I know way back, Mr. Boyd, we had discussions about maybe some visions of a much grander, and we know that that's not what this project is about. But one thing we were looking at the last few days is just, you know, how much mileage could we get out of making something that, you know, we're trying to solve. I like killing several birds with one stone, right? So we're making something that is a secure vestibule, but if you could, since you're building that out anyway, if you build something a little bit more, so that's the plan, and you all know and have seen this before, where it's coming out in between. There's kind of the larger gym volume and then your first kind of pod. Of course, that's part of the reason you don't really know where to go, because it's just sort of a crevice in between two bigger volumes, right? So maybe go to the next. So we did a little more work on this one, and there's sort of a perspective drawing, but maybe that thing could get overbuilt a little bit and make something a little, this isn't huge in scale. This is just sort of a first blush, kind of first thought, but, you know, building something that's a little bit bigger, and it may not be part of this appropriate for this project, you know, and the funds, and I realize that, but it's just something we were going to share.
Can you list it as alternate?
Well, I think there are ways that, you know, pretty much the plan part of it is not going to change. I mean, we're going to come out there and build out, and it's just a matter of how much you build. So there could, yes, I mean, I think the short answer is there could be a alternate for sort of that overbuild.
What is your prediction of that cost?
Well, it's more than if we don't build it, but I don't know. I mean, we can, it's probably, if we really want to pursue it, and maybe before we even think about doing it as an alternate, maybe we just get, you know, a contractor to take a look at it and maybe start, give us an idea of the cost difference between building out, you know, something much simpler and then something that's
The difference doesn't make you see the front door, or it would be more apparent with the.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is the design, but I think, you know, we started working through something that, you know, to do that, you're creating something with more volume, you know, and this was something that, you know, had glass, and, you know, you're going to be limited. I mean, we were trying to be mindful. You're going to have those long span joists that if you look at the existing drawings, they bear basically from that left volume to that pod volume. So they're, and we wouldn't eliminate those, you know. I mean, we're not going to demo those, right. So you're not going to have that cost. And we're really just building this sort of piece above that has just a little bit of depth. It's really just the depth, you know, that's like maybe a little more than 4 feet 8 or so, and just sort of straight up, and then, you know, that sign wall could be something.
Yeah, no, it'd be, I mean, at least it would magnify the actual starting point.
Because what's on top is more or less just a face. There's no office or building or anything. It's just a face.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, where was the SRO office?
Go back to the plan,
Okay.
right there. If you go back just on the plan side here, so no, look, you were on the right. So the SRO was, I think it's that, the eyes are telling me, but, right?
Yeah.
Right there.
Where the office is there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's not like right on the vestibule, but it's in really close proximity, and there's a lot of transparency.
Okay,
Visibility
good.
there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, something to think about. I mean, as I stand here and look at that, even that perspective drawing, I mean, it might be that you don't do that whole overbuild, and maybe just that projection of the canopy might, I mean, it would certainly help, right? It'd be a whole lot less expensive than that whole overbuild. So just want to put that out in front of everybody, you know, and just how far do you want to take that, you know, and
I like it. I mean, I don't know how much more it would cost to be interested. You know, just get a ballpark figure to see it.
And I think that's
but it
probably
would definitely magnify that, hey, here's the front door, which is a problem.
Yeah, because anybody's never been there, you don't know where to go.
And, you know, like I say, if you compare the two high schools, the thing about Crockett is, you know, it's the same kind of similar pod design, but the way the canopies and the
Boy,
way the steps
the
kind of
road
lead you in there,
is-
it's very obvious where you go in, you know, so it's just interesting, you know.
Yeah, you can go to several doors and boom before you ever know which one your front door was.
And I imagine people do
Or
that.
if
I'm sure.
somebody will go to the signing and,
Yeah.
you're just.
I mean, wayfinding is really important, you know, and I think
Yeah.
wayfinding does tie into security, so I think it's not just an aesthetic move, you know, I mean, if you're really directing people to a place because visually you've created something to draw them there, then I think that helps with security.
It did help when we put the sign up.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it did. So that's really kind of, I wanted to touch on kind of what the alternates would be in these three schools that just take a little bit more, and we'll share drawings along the way. And, you know, the great thing about doing these in Revit, which is 3D BIM modeling, is, you know, you can generate these 3D views out of it pretty easily, and people have a lot easier time kind of understanding what that looks like as opposed to looking at a plan and then an elevation drawing and kind of see it in space, the way human beings see things. So, yeah, so it's great. It's a great tool. So,
But everything else that you've showed us is not changing it. really.
yeah, I mean, we're just developing
Just the
it, you know,
front.
we've got specs, I mean, we're getting ready to kind of get into the specs, and that's obviously an important part of it with the films and everything like that, but, yeah.
Good deal.
And like I say, you know, because of the timeline with the athletics, that's slightly the priority just because of kind of that drop dead schedule, and these will be issued, you know, within a few weeks after that, after we issue those drawings.
Well, you've got some kind of rough idea what that will cost. How much do you think it'll be?
If you give me maybe tomorrow to maybe put a pen to paper, I could get back with something. Because honestly, it's hard to figure things these days. You know, something that seems really reasonable to me is I'm blown away when somebody comes back. Yeah, it's just with the inflation, you know.
Do you think-
I'd like to say I know my business, but it's been hard these last couple of years.
Do you think with all the deal we've got to do, we said 3.5 million, do you think that's gonna be wrong now?
No, I mean, my gut feeling on those are, and I think Todd said this maybe in one of those meetings, some of those will probably be a little more than that, some of those will be a little less than that, you know? And I think we were sort of banking on, that's why it was kind of easier for us to sort of take them as a whole, is that, you know, with some of the unknowns, you know, you could sort of expect that they may wash out a little bit. So I think 3.5, you know, with something like this pushing up above that, I mean, I
don't
think
think
we're
we
still,
know until we get there.
yeah, I think we're still kind of in the we're in the ballpark, but, you know, obviously, the more you build, the more you do at that entry, it's going to be more expensive. I mean, that's common
But Paul may
sense.
throw that in since we're doing both of these projects together.
What's that?
I said, you may just throw that in since we're doing all these projects with you too.
Yeah, that's what Todd said. He's like,
Right.
he's not here to figure
still
it out.
say- he can That's still what say Todd no told us.
No,
So
that
that's all,
does look good.
that's what I've got on the updates. If there's any questions, happy to answer them or try to answer them. I did come prepared to talk a little bit more about the city building.
Please do.
Most of us met there yesterday, and I've been there a couple of times now. So I just, honestly, the best way to think about it, and I've got kind of a list. I know you talked to Dr. Bell about just sort of list of pros and cons, and I've got kind of a list, and, you know, I can put that in an email or on a sheet, and, you know, that might be helpful for everybody to take a look at. But this is in no way any kind of finished, you know, you can see that it's very, very rough. You know, it does embody a lot of the things that we talked about when we were walking there on the site. So the gym, so we can start there with the gym. You know, we all talked on the side about, well, you know, we're gonna have to get rid of a row of columns. Of course, when I'm there, in my mind's eye, I'm thinking about it running sort of page, if you look at page left to right, but it makes perfect sense that it would run page north-south, because that bay is wider, so you can actually get, or, you know, that bay was, and I never measured those, but counting tile, that bay was somewhere around 34-ish feet, so you could actually get regulation, you know, you'd be really tight just to even get the court in the other direction, because it was only like a 25-foot.
Right.
So, you know, and we don't have to raise the roof, because you heard the realtor, I mean, that was the 26-foot bearing height, so we're right there for our typical sort of gym bearing height for a regulation gym. So I think it could work. Now, you know, those red dashed lines that I have in there, that would be 4 truss girders that have to, when we take those middle columns out, that would have to span from column to column, right? And, you know, there's a lot of trigger work there, but it could be done. One thing we talked about was, you know, the more we stood there in that big kind of column space is, you know, if we got rid of a bay, you know, so that's what that white with the red dashed line around it there is. So it gives you exposures, you know, gives your classrooms daylight there. And that was just taking out one of those 25-foot wide bays. And then that creates 2 double-loaded corridors. Like I say, it's, you know, we were just there yesterday, so I didn't have much time, and I just sort of was throwing this down. Those blue boxes, you know, would be classrooms. So you got a couple of double-loaded classrooms there on the right side, and a little easier to kind of figure out the new portion, which is, I think the realtor said it was that part that's built in the late 90s or whatever, but the one that's closest to the main road. And that just, and you know, you get those classrooms on the far outside that get good natural light, and then, you know, you're going to be stuck with some that are inboard, you know, that don't get natural light. But, you know, and just a bullet point list, that's obviously one of the cons, you know, of the building, is the depth of that floor plate, and we talked about that yesterday. I think, go ahead.
No, I was just, in my mind, I was looking, I'm trying to figure out how you was gonna lay that out, and I really like that. How many, and you may not know this answer, and don't be afraid to tell me.
Yeah, I probably don't, but.
Okay, because I was wondering, with the way you laid this out, student-wise, what kind of capacity?
I could work on that a little.
Okay.
I don't know that
Okay.
right now, because like I say, I was really just looking to fit pieces where they would go and where they would logically. I was just trying to help you guys get an idea about how it might lay out. Because when you go there, it's just a big column grid building, and it's kind of hard to imagine how it could be turned into a school, right?
Of course, on the left, the highway side, that's 2 stories.
And that's 2 stories. So
It'd be stacked somewhat like that.
You know, that if you look at that existing plan, that was a little, the way the core came into that space, it was you had a little more room on the lower level, but it would be very simple. Yeah. So you'd have double those classrooms, Chad, that kind of point on that side. You know, other obvious things, you know, that admin is going to be up kind of near this, you know, we talked about a lot of things yesterday. Part of the admin would be there, obviously receptionist right where kids come in, and that's the main entry with a secure vestibule. And then, you know, it seems almost purpose-built for an admin area when you go up the stairs. And that corner we talked about, that corner being perfect for a principal's office, and it's got eyes on the entry and things. So a lot of that maybe could be done without a ton of change and manipulation there. You know, we talked about the lower right there, where, you know, obviously where that CD, that might be a little big, but just sort of as a color block exercise, CDC sped down there. There's already a restroom down there, and it's got an exterior.
That's what I was gonna ask. Besides that one, which that one looked like it was adequate, what other exterior doors, except for the front, would you think would be?
Well,
would that be?
So one thing that I talked about yesterday too was, I think as much as we could bank along the perimeter, which might, you know, think about that in the renovation costs, I think you'd want to cut some openings in that, just for windows. But you're talking about for door,
Like, you know, dismissal, like car riders, bus
well,
riders.
I think what I think makes a lot of sense is the bus would go in that. You know, your buses would go into that main entry, sort of where that entry drum is, and you've got all that parking lot, you know, where you could create stacking and queuing for cars, and I think they could pick up over here. You know, it's kind of where that existing loading area is now, so that would require some modification, but I think that would be a logical place, and it kind of segregates buses and cars.
Sure.
And that could work.
And then the kitchen area would have something back there too.
Yeah, you know, and there's not a lot of land beyond
I
that.
know,
It's
it's
really,
just-
really close, but, you know, and I obviously left that there because the services are there, you know, there's a really big commercial hood there. I think to the degree we could salvage as much as we could of that, it's in good shape. You know, that building, that's one of the pros, that building has been very well maintained. So then the kind of the gray areas, I mean, a lot of them are just existing restroom areas that, you know, for those of us, I know we all kind of got splintered and split up there yesterday, but like that area here on the new part with the restrooms, you know, they're in excellent shape. I wouldn't touch them, you know, just to save money, you know. So, and there's gonna be places where we're gonna add, you know, we're gonna have to cut and trench and add plumbing just because I know plumbing code, and I haven't had a chance to study that, but the plumbing code is gonna require more for an educational occupancy. And then the other part of it is they're just not all in all the right places, you know. And like take for instance, that gray bar here to the left of the gym, you know, that's kind of where I start thinking about, you know, a core, it's deep in the building, so a core of locker rooms, dressing rooms, you know, to support, you know, basketball and you know, sports functions in there. So, you know, and maybe that's a good place to sort of segue into that list. You know, I mean, then maybe I just start with the cons, you know, because there are pros and cons. And, you know, cons,
There's no way the gym could go out on the end. All the way where them classrooms is and move the classrooms that way.
It could. The only reason I buried it there is so I could get natural light into the classrooms, you know, by.
It's a biggie.
By cutting, and that was also by, you know, Keith, you and I talked about that there yesterday, you know, cutting that one bay out, and you get,
But could you imagine, Keith, and I'm just thinking of myself right here, where they removed that one bay to exterior exposure, you got all that parking right there. After hours, when they did have a ball game or whatever, they could walk right in that removed bay and they're right there at the gym.
Right.
I mean,
Straight in.
That would be convenient.
I'm thinking about Boone's Creek where Daniel Boone had to play a lot of ball games there. There's no parking on that end. And, you know, the good thing about most of our gyms are out the end where they don't have to go into schools to go to, you know, to be at the gym.
Where did you think about the media center? I remember.
You know,
talking
and
yesterday,
again,
hadn't thought.
you know, I like to get natural light in every space that I can. I think it's just sort of part
That's
of being
important.
humane, you know, but, you know, you see where, and maybe just chalk it up to the time that I had spaces that are left white, you know, in this, they could be carved out of those spaces, so it, you know, it could be one that's inboard, and unfortunately you don't have a lot of ability for natural light unless you do it from above.
Right.
But you know, you've got that space that's back there, it's already in seminar rooms back there, or meeting rooms.
Training
whatever.
rooms, yeah.
Training rooms, so they're a little small for classrooms for the most part, but you know, you could take a partition out between that, you know, and then you probably got I think you've got a pretty decent sized classroom, so, you know, but you could remove a lot of those partitions back there, and that might be a place for your media center, so. Yeah, like I say, this was just sort of to start some conversation and just to maybe show, you know, the first thing you have to start laying out is where the circulation goes, you know, and that's all the yellow kind of in there, right? So that, because then you just hang the puzzle pieces off of that.
Sure.
Looked like that flowed pretty good with, well, you've got them set up.
And I
there.
tried to work with the column bays and you know, generally where some circulation already exists, you know, like in front of the cafeteria. I mean, there's just places where it just makes it's just common sense, you know, that you're going to put them in there, in those locations.
Would it be appropriate to bring in somebody from the commission with you, Jerry, and Mike, and let the Lewis group look at this right here and start this conversation of what could be there? I mean, I know Vince and some others haven't been by to see the location. I'd like to have another chance to take them by the location. And is that appropriate, Jerry?
Well, I mean, sure, I think engaging with the county commission would be the reasonable next step as far as just having that public discussion about the feasibility of that facility and the need in the future that we know it will be there and the opportunity. So.
Could we invite them to a night where the Lewis group would be, or Skype in or even be here to look at this? And maybe not for just an informational setting, for them to look at that, to see what that may look like, followed by the next morning visit or whatever, or that day visit to where they could walk through and see what it looked like then?
I mean, the answer would be yes.
Okay.
Tried to coordinate it. We just would need to give everyone enough notice. Both Lewis Group, all the commissioners. I mean, because there would probably be so many elected officials, obviously public notice.
Right. I mean, obviously, just because this shows you kind of what it could be, and especially it's nice for us that went out yesterday and saw it.
So you're saying, let's sit down and review something similar to this, then go tour, actually tour it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or go tour it before and then come back in here and see this and just have a discussion of, you know, where we see ourselves and see where the dominoes lay to where, you know, either we're going to keep pushing to make this a reality, or if there's, you know, no desire there from them, you know, because it's got to be either with us or, you know, whatever. I mean, it's kind of a partnership deal.
You know, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but
No.
I want to kind of build on, so, and that may just equally talk about sort of my number one, and maybe hierarchically, they're not really the first pro and the first con, but first on my list that came to mind, kind of my first pro was cost, and I'm not in any way prepared to talk about cost of this. Right now, we talked a little bit yesterday, I have some ideas about maybe a square foot renovation cost that, you know, and I don't think that's my role right now, but my number one con being not purpose-built. So, you know, kind of resolving those things, if we had the opportunity, we'd always want to build a purpose-built school, you know, from the ground up, and then, you know, you program it, you get it exactly how you want it, and it, you know, you're not always 100% correct, but you're going to get a whole lot closer. I think the number one pro being the cost, as I understand it, is, and I think that's why we're having this whole conversation, is you have to, from what I understand, the cost of this could be, and even when you add the renovation cost onto it, you might be, and I'll just say it, you might be building this thing for 50 or 60% of what the same square footage of the building would be. So I think that's where you all are, I think, are correct in at least having the conversation, you know. Personally, you know, I like what I do. I kind of like the challenge of making it fit and making it work. So I mean, and that can't be the driver, you know.
Yeah.
But if I'm tasked with that, I like the idea of, you know, and I have to get a lot of input from you guys and the educators and everything. But I like the idea of something that seems kind of not really.
Challenging.
I like the challenge, you know. But I think the more important thing, you all don't really care about that. I think the thing that's really important is that if you could build it and make it work, it's got to work, I mean, you know, at a pretty high level. But if you can make it work and you've saved a lot of dollars, then I think you've done something good.
As far as, and we greatly appreciate what you've done here. It gives us a lot of vision about what you can do, but to
It's
really,
not perfect.
right? And I mean, you had a few hours to work on it, so
Right.
I think that's commendable what you've done there.
Well, I appreciate it.
What kind of time would it take for you to get something for us that would be kind of feasible? Give you enough time to look at it a little more in depth to figure on it, and then what kind of expense would that be for us to have you just come up with some sort of a concept?
Yeah, it's like a
This
concept,
structure.
not even really a
Right,
schematic
and we
design.
would
just a
know
concept.
it's not the thing.
Plan diagram, but, you know, fit. And I think, you know, they told us they have CAD drawings of this, you know, so that would help immeasurably, right? And that cuts a lot of our time when you're trying to go up there, field verify, and generate this thing from the start. And we would, you know, what I said earlier about with the security upgrades, it's great doing it in BIM and Revit. And if this project went forward, we would ultimately do that. But I think at the state we're at now, if we're just doing a concept, we can keep it in CAD. And then you know, do, just PDFs from CAD drawings. And, you get a pretty good idea of, we look a little more closely at kind of the bays and the spacing for the gym, and maybe a little more consult with a structural engineer about what it really would take to do those truss girders.
Excuse me a minute,
Yeah,
did
sure.
anybody mention anything to that Jerry Penzold, the realtor, about any type of a time frame or anything? I mean, just everything's kind of the beginning, okay.
Yeah, yesterday's walkthrough was just, number one, get the board on board, if you would, to see if there's any interest, And I think by what Jerry and I talked about earlier, I think, the board's sharing quite a bit of interest. And, that's the reason why I did ask you or Dr. Bell wanted just to give us your insight, pros and cons. Will it work, will it not work, just to where us as a board can kind of define what we want to do from here as far as the next step.
Right. And then as far, I guess to answer the question about kind of a concept, I don't think that's going to take a ton of time, and we just send a proposal and then that just for.
Well, too, and I think that would fit better in Chad's plan.
Yeah.
With the commission to have a more in-depth concept of what we're thinking.
Yeah.
Before we do the, bring them on board.
And right, and even this just quick and dirty look at it.
Oh, yeah.
It helps this
That
conversation,
there is
which is
just
what
tremendous.
I knew we were going to talk about it, and rather than just give you a list to provide that visual, I think is helpful, and if it's a little more cooked,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
going to be a whole lot more
Yeah.
helpful.
And saying that and giving a little more time for it to cook, we could get capacities and things,
Yeah.
classroom sizes, just doesn't have to be exact. We know we're still 40,000-foot view of this, but
That's right.
we could have just an idea of some of those.
Because that's going to be some of the major questions that's going to come up with
Yeah.
the commission.
And that'll be pretty easy, right? Because, I mean, with all the schools that we do, just in terms of, an 800 core school, what does that look like? What's the typical size of the core pieces, your media center, your gymnasium, in that kind of, and I'm not saying this is 800, maybe it's 600, but what I'm saying. Or, maybe we go at it the other way and just say, you kind of go through the study and block those out, and you say, well, this will support a 600 core school.
We needed to support 1,000.
Right, and it's 137,000 square feet, so in theory, you've got the square footage, I think, that can do it. It's just, is all the square foot, does it lay out in the right way? And that's kind of $1 million question, right? So.
Yeah, in the real estate world, rentable and usable is two different things.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Is this what this board wants to do? I mean, is this, because my opinion, the commission's gonna say, where are we gonna get the money at? And I can see some of them say, well, we probably got about $2.5 to $3 million left of the capital projects money that's not spoken for. So that will be, if it's $1.5 million, $2 million year payment, is that what I'm hearing? I mean, we've not brought it to a vote or anything like that, but.
I don't think we're there yet, I mean.
Well, yeah, we are, because we're talking about it.
We'd have to see how much it costs to
Well,
property. We're
I
still
mean-
seeing if it's feasible right now.
Well, I think the biggest question is how many students and cost and the feasibility to do this before I think we have to go to that next step. I mean, that's my thought.
Well, I mean, when you go start bringing the commission in, then that thought is secure here. And it's,
Well, I think in the retrospect of our last meeting, budget meeting last Thursday, and talking about teamwork, I mean, either we need them to look at this and see whether or not this is a vision they share with us and a need. And, and if they don't, then we move on.
Right.
If they do, and they kind of like the way this looks and gives them a vision of where, that we think we're going to be with the growth and everything out there great, then, we need them on board, and then the money part and the different things that will come on. but I don't think we're there yet. I mean, we like what we saw yesterday, or I think the ones that was there and everything, everybody liked. It was just hard to
Visualize.
see this, but now that you've done this, Paul, if we go a little step further, but I don't think, in essence of teamwork and building together, either, you know, when you go just a little bit further, let them look at it, then come in and see how you've laid it out, and get us some ideas of capacities and stuff, you know what I'm saying, and get some ideas of what we have there, and, you know, it's either then, do we go further, or do we move on? I mean, because there's no use to waste anybody's time or another dollar if we're all not bought in, and we are going to work as a team, and we're going to go back and see this vision together, or we don't, and we, you know, we go with what we have and what we need to make what we have work. So.
And I would like to let the three that did not get a chance to tour.
Or yeah, go with the commission when they get together, and there'll be more opportunities.
There's something else too. Most of the school, well, all of the schools we've created and built, like the Boones Creek School, they were already Boones Creek Elementary and Boones Creek Middle, and they meshed together, and all of the staff and all of the faculty and everything was there. Same thing with Jonesboro. This will be also, not only the building, it will be all new people, you know, that we'd be having salaries and things like that.
Unless
Correct?
this
Mr.
unless
Boyd?
this
I mean,
replaced Greg.
Oh, you think that would be?
This is
Well, I don't
replacing
think we're
Greg.
there.
This will
No.
replace.
I don't think we're there to
Right.
decide, you know, what's gonna happen. And I think
So
that's the
they will
reason
move
why,
over there, okay.
I just think that's the reason why we need to have the commission, the next step. See what we're gonna do and get the capacities before we, either we keep dreaming or we just shut the book and move on.
Mr. Walker.
Just in case they would watch this meeting, at their next meeting, I wanted to put it on the record that, you know, we've talked with you guys for a long time, and your 10-year proposal outlook was that we may be looking at 2 more elementary middle schools in the gray area because of the growth. Well, this right here may be that building and land all in one that could take a big chunk of that growth in the future, even if, and just think of this, even if we kept Gray School open and this school there. We have that.
You guys are setting me up well from pros list.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, it's like
Yeah.
a scripted this. But that is a big one, and we talked about this on the site yesterday, right? You know, this is, and you all know it before we knew it, and handed you a book that said it, that's your growth area. So I think that is definitely a pro that this came available, you know, in the place that you most need it, you know. Now, that doesn't make it a slam dunk, but, you know, it is in the place, in the area of most growth. So I think, you know, I'll just kind of keep going, kind of build on that and go through my list of pros and cons. Another pro is just access. I know you expressed a concern, right, about you're right by the highway, but, you know, you're far enough off, but access, you know, into that school into that location is excellent, you know, and I mean, even just from the interstate, right? I mean, so access is really good. I think the adjacent land that comes with that, I mean, there's so much parking. You got, obviously, elementary school, you got way too much parking, you know, but we talked about turning some of that back into playgrounds and stuff like that. So you would have that opportunity, you know, you're not hurting for adjacent land out there. You know, one thing, and this may be unique to me, I talked about it with maybe a couple of people yesterday, but, you know, and again, it all depends on how this thing lays out with the square footage, but, you know, is there a possibility for sort of some kind of dual program kind of, you know, like part of it is the elementary school, but, you know, I think I brought up to some of you about what we're doing over in Cotton County with sort of a pull-out middle school CTE sort of program that they're doing for the whole county. Now, granted, they're a lot smaller county than you got, you know, but, and I'm not saying it has to be something like that, but, you know, even for a CTE type program, I mean, even that loading dock area, I mean, that might help you think about that in a different way, you know, and sort of how you divide that. But, I mean, I guess maybe the pro there is just sort of the flexibility that this might afford me, I guess, is what I'm thinking. I think the maintenance of the building is a pro, because it, you know, it has been maintained well. I think we probably could all agree that security, you know, we always talk about security, but I think, you know, that vestibule and I think I can imagine this being turned into something that was a secure, you know, facility for kids to be in. Again, the high bearing height, you know, that 26 feet, I think that's a pro, because you don't have to, you know, yes, we do have to put truss girders in there to get a gym that doesn't have columns down the middle, but as far as building up, you know, it already will support that. I think that's a pro. And then the kitchen that we talked about earlier, that's a definite pro, because that equipment, those services, will some things have to get shifted around for an elementary school, you know, educational occupancy? Yeah, probably, but that stuff's there already, and even the adjacent dining spaces. Cons being, again, not purpose-built, the depth of the floor plate, and that directly leads to the daylight issues that we've all talked about. So that's a con, but, you know, and that's the thing, you know, we can talk about cutting out a day, and that helps, but cost-wise, you know, demo costs money. I mean, that, you know, there's exterior walls to build back, so it's not like you're just taking something out and that's free. You know, that's not a cheap fix there. You know, it helps a lot by removing that and kind of creating those exposures, but it'll cost money. Kind of my last con, and I don't really know how I need to talk about it just yet, but we have this issue. Actually, it's that same building I was just talking about at the Newport for Cobb County. So that's, I know some of you we talked about know a little bit about that. It's that Newport Center, and it's, you know, there's an old Ingles, Walmart, and kind of spaces in between, but it's just a retail center. They already have a professional development center in there, and they're looking to have that sort of middle school CTE. But, you know, one thing we've come up with our structural engineer is it's called structural risk category. So when you change that occupancy, there's sort of, long story short, and maybe to put it kind of in layman's terms, is that, you know, there's some upgrade of the structure and the connections that are going to be required. So that's something that costs money. So I just want to bring that up. It's a little bit cautionary. I don't know what it would require. I mean, my gut feeling is the structure's probably a little better, in better shape and better design, because, you know, a lot of times retail structures, they're not really built to be the most long lasting, you know. So we might be okay with this, but I just want to throw that out there as a potential. I don't think would be a huge cost, but it could be a cost that has to be added and factored in terms of upgrading the structural capacity of this building, because those risk categories, you know, for an educational occupancy, they're higher than they are for like a retail. And really, if we got deeper into that, I'd probably bring structural engineer to come and talk more about that, because that's more their bailiwick. I know enough to be dangerous about it.
I'm happy they do that by us.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Does anybody remember how many that actually held when it's in full operation? Was it about 1,200?
I think 2,500.
Was it 2,500?
I didn't think it was that many, because we're the largest employee of the county.
Oh, I don't know. That's the reason why I asked. I don't.
So it wouldn't be more than us.
I couldn't remember what the.
Didn't they have shifts?
Yeah, they work 24 hours.
They employ 2,500, so I don't know
How many was in the building at one time? I don't know. It's just curious.
So that would, I know they employ 2,500.
So 3 shifts, that'd be 800 roughly.
I think it probably employ, or 12 to 1,500.
And the steps going up, gonna need some work to that second level where they just for that many students trying to.
Yeah, there's definitely.
Or did you find another location than just that one?
No, but there's going to have to be some upgrades. I mean, obviously, if you have that many students, and again, the building code will dictate, dictates like 0.3 inches per person, that
Sure.
sort of creates your corridor widths and creates your stair widths, so yeah, it's, we just have to get in the code and figure out what, but I can guarantee you there's gonna be some widening and some upgrades that are required.
Stairs on both ends, stairs in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we'll have to have 2 means of egress out from every space. So-
Mr. Flair?
Does that need to be a board action for you all to move forward with getting the commission and everything, or it could be?
I mean, you can certainly take action. I don't know that it requires.
I just think everybody.
I mean, I just wanted to make sure.
Well, it's the,
More information.
Move.
Yeah.
I guess it is the feeling of the board wanting Paul to go ahead and do a little, we'll take one step further as far as the concept and then go from there, or is that what I'm hearing, or?
That's the reason I was asking. I just wondered if we need the motion to make sure there's a majority rule to, you know.
I mean, we could, I think like Mr. Boyd said, we don't have to, but if y'all feel like it, I'd be more than happy to take it.
I think everybody's
It
curious.
just shows unity for the commission, if we're all, you know, for it.
I'll make a motion that we, move forward and sometime make an appointment, you know, let Paul and the Lewis group do a little bit more digging and, not literally, but move forward a little bit and, bring the commission, set up another meeting for them for a walkthrough, and then, fact-finding session downstairs where we can lay it out and talk a little bit more about it and see whether or not that's where we want to go, but I'll make that in the form.
We have a motion, we have a
I'll
second. Discussion. All right, let's vote, please, Jimmy.
Voting's open.
Oh, we do appreciate your time and effort on this, for what short period you've had.
It is quick and dirty.
We do appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
You and Dr.
Yeah,
Bell
yeah.
both for
Well,
coming up.
I think it helped the conversation, you know. And the thing I might suggest is if we do a proposal, you know, then that might be the thing, and maybe sooner than, sounds like maybe you want it sooner than next board meeting, however you all want to.
If it's available.
Approve that, and then, I think what we would try to do is first get the CAD drawings, because that's gonna be a huge part of that, and save a lot of time. And we'll try to do it, you know, where we're not just spending a ton of time, so it, you know, it won't be that rough, but, you know, maybe it won't be.
Might be easier, whatever Jerry think, might be easier for us just to put you in touch with Jerry Petzold,
Yeah.
the broker, and then you all can work it out from there, what you need, he can send you, I think.
Yeah, we talked, the first time I went to see the building there a couple weeks ago, they seemed pretty amenable to letting us have the CAD drawing, so I don't think there's gonna be a problem in getting that, so.
And you can update Jerry, and he can let us know as far as where you're at.
Okay.
All approved.
All right, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. McCall?
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you
Yeah,
again.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes. I guess we'll see you in a month.
Yes, sir.
And I'll be talking to you.
Well, we're having a board meeting earlier.
Yeah, we changed our board meeting to the 29th of June because of the 4th.
Week before the 4th of July.
Yeah,
So we
okay.
call it
Okay.
the Thursday.
And we got a
We'll
workshop.
have somebody,
We'll
I'll be
connect.
out of town. I know
Okay.
I'm out of town. so-
We should have at least one or more of our weekly update calls.
Yeah, right. And we probably won't do that tomorrow since we have this, but we'll have that
Next week.
next week, yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, if I can get a recommendation for consideration of meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
discussion. Let's vote, please, Jennifer.
Voting's open. Mr. Masters, how do you vote?
Yes, it's not coming out, yes.
All approved.
Thank you. Next, if I can get a recommendation for approval of meeting minutes.
We approve the minutes.
Second, discussion. Let's vote, please, Jennifer.
Voting's open.
yes from me.
I'll agree.
Thank you. Next is announcement. Mr. Boyd.
Just reminders, we have scheduled board workshop June 20th, as you can see, 5 p.m. normal workshop time. A date that's not in that list of dates is a reminder, you know, the budget process is still ongoing. Next week, there's budget committee meetings in the morning on Monday, but they're officially on their calendar. I think in addressing FY24, they have a meeting scheduled for Thursday, June 22nd. And then their normal monthly meeting is still on the calendar scheduled for Monday, June 26th.
So the 22nd is in the evening?
It is.
Okay,
It's listed at 6 p.m. at the Justice Center. And then, of course, as was just referenced, looking at ahead, and the first July meeting would actually be scheduled that last Thursday of June because of the first week of July and the 4th of July holiday period. So that would be officially the July meeting, but on June 29th, 5:30. If we can, we'll just move right into the list of reports just for public record and full awareness of the board. Provide the enrollment updates, field trips that don't require board action, the updates on from maintenance, the monthly personnel report and activity that continues. You know, we're in the process of filling vacancies, and we'll be doing so throughout the summer. We hope that we can get as many of those filled before the end of June. But you know, our principals and others that are hiring managers will certainly be working on getting all the vacancies filled. Grant report from Ms. McKinney. Ongoing work there. A lot of grant activity at the end of the fiscal year as far as utilizing the funds that are available through grants. And that's really all for that part of the report.
Thank you, sir. Next is if I can get a recommendation for consideration of consent agenda.
I'll make that one. Second.
Discussion. Let's vote, please, Junior. Thank you. All right, next we go into discussion and presentation. Mr. Boyd, FY24 general purpose school budget.
Let's see, this is
the federal.
This is just the school nutrition documents Brad is working on the last hour, trying to make sure everything's updated in the way. The first item on the presentation list is a update of FY24 general purpose budget, the 141 budget. So I'll pass that just for you. It is loaded in BOE Connect. It just has a hard copy in front of you. I'm looking at the same thing you all are. Okay. Yeah, this one is relatively what you've already approved. The school nutrition part.
Kleenex or face the best way.
Bless you.
Can you give one to Jim?
So what's been provided in front of you is just some additional or proposed changes. One specific change that's represented in the FY24 budget was we got definitive numbers about the anticipated health insurance increase, and Brad has incorporated that into the budget. Yeah, that's not the that's the school nutrition budget. It's the FY24. I don't know which document it is. That's how it's labeled in there. Could be one of those June 1, 2023 documents. That is That's not it. I'm not sure which one of those June 1 documents are the one I'm looking at right
Is
now.
that what you're looking at? Why don't you just take that in with this, you just had it pulled up.
That's not it.
This one
It was the one you just had pulled up.
No, that's the dietary budget. We're talking about the general purpose 121 fiscal year.
Top three is all general fund, it'll be, just, you'll need them all three, so just the top three. If you can leave that up, then pick the other two ones.
Okay. This way.
There's your general fund budget.
Okay, what I passed out is a summary to the board, but it reflects, these documents reflect, just highlighting the changes. It has nothing other than the things, these changes have been made. The one that I was mentioning was the health insurance increase. We projected at 2%, and it was actually 5.1% is what we were given. So Brad has reflected that in the changes. The other one is the discussion about the earned interest. The board had previously voted on it, but we based on the discussion, realizing that the board will not obviously receive that earned interest, we just wanted the budget to reflect the actual of what we should anticipate in FY24.
But everything else is the same.
Nothing else
That's
has
good.
changed other than the adjustments that I've just called out.
So what the bottom number changed to after the after the health insurance, or the insurance part went up 5%, so what?
The number remains as it was. Brad had looked at other items and within the category, and we just made adjustments to account for the $160,000 increase based on the 5.1 increase. We just made some shifts within line items. Instead of what would have happened, the other option would have been just to add that $160,000 to the fund balance that we were using to balance the budget. So to keep from increasing the amount of fund balance we were using by 160, we just looked at items. Brad looked at items that he felt that we couldn't make the moves, and we just incorporated the 160 into that.
So do we need a motion to accept this as changed?
They do, what the timeline is we've been asked to the final FY24 budget to the budget committee for Monday. There's a period where they have to be prepared to advertise the budgets, and Monday, and they've asked if we get this to them for that meeting on Monday.
Ms. Swain?
Make a motion that we move forward with the general budget as it proposed in front of us with those changes.
We have a motion and a second discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the general purpose school budget FY24 as proposed to us tonight.
You second that?
Mr. Hammond.
Mr. Hammonds.
Thank you.
Any more discussion?
Is this with the stuff in it that we voted against?
Yeah, it has that earned interest removed,
The 166.
revenue, and then incorporates the increase in health insurance.
So through voting for this, if the commission accepts it, this will be the final.
This is the final proposed. Now, obviously what can happen is when they vote up or down, they could send it back to the board, and what we even send them with this amendment or this proposal.
But what I'm asking just to understand is if we vote for this right now in favor of it, and they vote in favor of it the way it is, we are voting for giving them the amount of money that they've asked for.
We've reduced the revenue that would go to the county for debt service.
Less dietary.
Yeah,
Less
the
dietary.
143 of the school nutrition dietary fund, the discussion was clarified. You heard Trustee Story indicate they realized that account needed to be separated because that earned interest needed to stay where it was at.
And basically, it's gonna be taken anyway.
From our
Eventually.
141, the general fund.
So we're useless.
Any more discussion?
I certainly don't agree that the board is useless.
Well,
We're giving in, and that's what I'm sitting here bowling right now.
I just think, you know, the reality is that that's the direction that it will go. And I just ask that we reflect our budget based on that.
So it will just prolong the inevitable, right?
You know, I don't know if it'll prolong anything.
Okay.
It just will reflect that earned interest will go to debt service in the county general.
The whole argument that I got is that they've never asked for it before. And right there, our health insurance went up $166,000, and that almost earned interest money would take care of that.
Our understanding is, even if you keep it in the budget, we're not gonna get it.
Yeah, well, I think that's
Just
pretty,
clarification.
I think that's pretty, you know,
Okay, let's vote, please. Jennifer, can you have?
and can they do that? By law, can
My
they do
knowledge,
that?
They can on that because it's local. Well, it's locally generated through the trustee's office, so my understanding is yes, they can.
But they have their own fund balance. That's my argument. They have their own fund balance. They put money in it. Their
My
interest.
understanding is the commission has that statutory authority over that particular right. That's my understanding.
Okay, let's vote, Jennifer, please.
Voting's open. Mr. Masters, how do you vote?
Yes.
It carries with 2 noes.
Okay. And even though there was no changes, I do ask, we have the school nutrition budget in the list, just for technical reasons, ask you to consider approving the proposed school nutrition dietary budget for FY '24 as presented.
And the interest is in that, on that.
It remains the same with that interest revenue included in the budget.
Make a motion that we pass the school nutrition and dietary budget for FY '24 as presented.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Discussion. Let's vote, please, Jennifer. Yes.
Thank you.
Even though the item is identified as FY '24, we do have year-end closeout for FY '23 that Brad has proposed all budget amendments for the end of the year for us to close out, and that's item. And of course, it's balanced.
I'll approve.
And I'll let Brad elaborate on anything that you'd like to highlight in this. This is FY, this is current budget year, this is closeout. So ensuring all categories, no category has a negative balance, that all items in the overall budget balances.
Just, you're familiar with this format, but right here where it says budget amendment 2, it's amending the previous budget that's in effect right now. So any changes that you see in this column will be reflected in here. And of course, this does not affect next year's budget. This is several things. Remember, throughout the year, a lot of the big projects you've approved, and we said we would true it up at the end of the year. That's what a big part of this is. So you'll see, especially in the maintenance section and even in the board section with the Lewis group, there's a lot of true up going on there from prior approvals. But the biggest part, now this, for example, is insurance funds we've received for reimbursement on damages, over the Christmas holidays. Not all of that will be fully expensed by June 30th, so that will go into the fund balance for FY '24. So, but a big part of this is grant funds, like this $1.45 million, that's new grant money that just was not budgeted. Those expenses are balanced out on the expense side. In fact, most of this is grant funds, mostly. summer school grants as well. And these are adjustments. When you see a negative, I'm pulling funds out of that line. When you see a positive, we're putting more funds in. Now, in a lot of the salary lines, if I think we're close, I'm going to be on the safe side and put more funds in there than I think we need, just to make sure we don't have audit findings, because we do get an audit finding if we go over on a salary line item. As long as the category as a whole is not over, we're okay. So no salary line, and then the category as a whole cannot go over. So each section over here. So that's why you're going to see a lot of movement here. Where I've identified places we can pull to balance the budget elsewhere as well. And I can scroll down. You know, this is online. You certainly are welcome to it. Some of this, you know, like these are some vocational grants. All of that money may not get spent by June 30th, but a big part of it is you've already approved some $100,000, I think $200,000 purchase orders on that particular grant. That was the CPI grant, for example. But that's what this is. You'll see it doesn't mean that people are getting pay raises or anything like that. It just simply means I'm being safe. If I think, so if someone got moved or moved a position and they moved in a line, and I think that we're close, I'm going to throw an extra 10 or 20,000 in there to make sure, because with summer school and with overtime, I'm guessing what this last month's going to be, and June's our biggest month. You know, so I have learned from past years to err on the side of caution. So you're seeing a lot of movement in some of these lines that may or may not fully be necessary, but I want to be safe. A lot of the projects you've approved in maintenance, 72,610, 72,620, you'll see, like this is some of the maintenance lines. Now I'm having to move more money in. The electricity, for example, I'm projecting instead of 1.74, we're going to probably hit around 1.9. So I'm moving more into the electricity and other utilities. Here is the 72,620 line. A lot building repairs, things you have approved as a board throughout the year. A lot of that hits here, so you're seeing some, some big movement there. You know, 600,000 that I'm moving in to cover that. So, so it's 12 pages. So this is just simply balancing, moving out here to put in this same line here for vehicles. That's all that is, same category. Now this food service, that's summer grants. That's the only reason that's in there, because we moved all food service expense to 143, but there is a summer school grant that includes food service. That's the only reason that's there, and it will not carry over to FY24. FY24 will still be zero.
So is it?
We didn't spend, I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, are we still on track to use about $1 million of fund balance to balance out?
So I now have May numbers in, which I did not have before. I'm gonna say give or take $1 million either way at this point. You know, June is, by far the biggest month. We'll probably have 12, 13 million in expenses where we normally have 6 with summer school. But after I don't have May's revenue yet, so I can say May's expenses, I do have that. And when I compare what I'm projected we're going to spend for the year in comparison to what the budget is, it does seem like we'll still come under budget in our overall expenses for the budget as a whole. Obviously not for certain lines, but as a budget as a whole. So that's gonna be positive for us. We budget for a worst case scenario, and we hope we don't have to use all that. So so I can tell you after May's numbers, the expenses, we're tracking under budget as a whole for the year. So which was budget in effect right now was 86 million. So it's bumped up because of this grant money that's coming in and grant expenses. So we'll see after June. But right now the expense projection does look positive for us. We know for this year we're exceeding our revenue, especially with the sales tax. So when you have more revenue and less expense, that's a good combination. But we had a big hole this year, as you know, in the budget. So I'm still very confident that the last projection was about 800,000 actually using the fund balance. Once I get May's revenues numbers in, I'll be able to dial that in a little closer. But just remember, in an $86 million budget with a lot of moving parts, especially here at the end. To swing $1 million either way at the end is not uncommon, you know, so just keep that in mind. Sometimes even $1 million or $2 million.
And that's in our approved budget for FY '23, and we incorporated, identified the use of fund balance to balance it, but our expenditures are much lower than the approved budget, and that's where, we would not be removing, say, $8 million from our fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. It really looks like what Brad has said, possibly a range between $1 and $2 million at most.
And if it swings positive, maybe we don't dip into fund balance.
Or it could even be zero.
That's where I'm very hesitant to project fund balances, even though I'm asked to by the county a lot. When there's still 2 or 3 months of expenses to go, especially with June being a month where we double the expense in 1 month. So, I was hesitant before, but I was asked to project that before. So, we'll see. To swing a couple of $1 million either way is very possible.
A couple of months still of expenses, but also revenue.
Right. I still don't have May's revenue, so I'll be able to. But in my projection, doing the budget amendment for year end, it's certainly looked a little more positive than I projected a month ago. So I'll know more once we get the May revenue report in.
Mr. Swain?
Make a motion we approve the FY '23 budget amendment as presented to us tonight.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Is there any more discussion? Let's vote, please, Joe.
Voting is open.
Yes.
Is yours still not working?
Mr. Simmons.
All agreed.
Thank you. Next, I guess, 5-year education and capital improvement plan.
Right before that is the FY '24 federal projects budget. It is federal projects, but we do have to have board approval. In the motion is listed as we request consideration for approval of the FY '24 consolidated federal application with budgets for fiscal year 2024 and for all subsequent amendments as approved by the Tennessee Department of Education. That's the motion that we request you to consider.
Mr. Swain?
Move for approval of the FY '24 federal budgets for fiscal year 2024 and all subsequent amendments as approved by the TDOE.
We have
Tennessee Department of Education.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Discussion. Let's vote, Jim, please.
Voting is open.
Yes.
How many computers do you need?
There's one that works.
It's pretty high tech. Right.
Are you still under go?
She went to the restroom, I think. We give her a minute.
If I may, while we wait, I just wanted to commend Mr. Whitaker. And it was really just managed very well by Mr. Whitaker. We actually had to manage a reduction in federal funds throughout the year. So he was able to work with the schools and through the title, all the process. And as we always want to, anytime we face those kinds of challenges, we want to make sure it has the least amount of negative impact on our students, on our school, on our teachers in schools. And I thank Mr. Whitaker and everyone else that worked on it to just kind of work through those challenges.
We were very fortunate. Federal projects, financial divisions do such a great job. Need to vote very much. A lot of times they're in the background in the dark. And technology too.
All agreed.
Thank you.
Next is our 5-year educational capital improvement plan being passed out.
And I had emailed you a draft that is represented in what I'm sharing you. This is the one with the annotations that I sent all the board members in a draft form. A few minor adjustments from what I sent you, but just wanted to walk through. That's the one that says, yeah, draft with annotations. Yeah. So, I tried to focus in on the items for FY24 and moving forward that I recommend we include in our educational capital projects plan that we would send to the commission, and with some changes that you see in gray at the bottom. We've had several projects that have been carried forward, not been completed or even started, carried forward for a couple of fiscal years. And as you notice, all those zeros underneath the one column, the 2024 column, the red box that highlights what I would recommend to include. You see all the, zero those out. And not that those projects aren't important. I think what we need to consider is prioritizing some of the big projects and capital expenditures in our request to the commission, and pull out those other projects that are smaller. And then as we want to address those, then we at the board level make decisions and move forward using fund balance. But those items that are highlighted or circled in red in fiscal year 24, just I went ahead and kind of ordered recurring items that really are essentially locked in. The trustee commission, I will say that amount that you see each fiscal year could change if there are changes in the amounts of the revenue. That's a percentage based on the amount of revenue that's coming through that fund. But the new Jonesboro K-8, as it comes online, the payment begins, and it comes out of the educational capital funds. And that amount, as you see, is $2.55 million. And then the Johnson City capital funds payment annually begins also, and that's $500,000. So that's just over $3 million that comes out of that total fund. And then the rest is at least available for, at this point in time, for us to request and focus in on projects. I've continued with what we have done for several years now in requesting funds for these through these funds. Technology, with our recurring and refresh cycle, I have made an intentional effort, as you will see, to begin pulling back on that. And what we will do in future fiscal years is bring that in or reprioritize other funds to, so for example, if you look at fiscal year 23 in technology, smart classrooms, tablets, we had, as we did years prior, 640,000. I brought it down by 40,000. The intent would be we look within our budget and identify ways to address that within our general purpose budget. And then each year after that, you see it's dropping by 50,000. And then after fiscal year 27, 100,000, 28, 300,000, and over the next several years out, the intent would be to completely take that item out of a capital projects mindset. It's really a recurring operational cost that we would just take out. And the other reason is, in addition, we see the cost of the transportation item increasing, increased cost of buses. So even though I'm reducing the technology, you see over time there's an increase in school bus cost. And that to me is a capital, definitely a capital project, a capital item, capital purchase. So really a lot of that fund is just shifting to transportation through this capital fund.
I'm sorry, could you explain number 12 for me?
Yes, ma'am. We had, that was in there last year. I carried that forward and left that there. When we vacate the building, we had put in funds to kind of set the renovation for the old Jonesboro Elementary School. Whether that's just to raise the round part and to set the stage of repurposing that building, we just had last year in the approved 5-year plan, put that amount in there. I just left it in there for FY '26.
What does the CO
25.
administration mean?
That's just a statement. At one time when I came in, and I'm still not 100% clear on what that building is intended to be used for, I was told that, or it was suggested that that could be either a reestablishment of the district office services. I mean, that's up for, that obviously is a board decision, absolutely, without any discussion. It's just a description.
I was gonna say, I don't think I've voted on that in 7 years, so, okay.
It's just a description.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Edelstein?
Yes, for number 7, school playground upgrades, the money that's there, how many playgrounds are you foreseeing that amount of money to cover?
Well, if we continue on our same pattern, we've more or less targeted 150,000 per school, so that would be 2.
Gotcha.
And what is on the prioritized list was Sulphur Springs and Fall Branch would be the next in the prioritized list.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Flainer?
Move for approval on the 5-year capital projects fund, provisions and updates as presented.
We have a motion, we have a second. Discussion. Let's vote, please, Jim.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that again, please?
Just move for approval as a capital projects
presented.
fund, 5-year
All right.
as presented.
Second. All agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. One thing of note, one adjustment we made, previous were projections on the penny rate. When, starting with 2024, that revenue is generated from what we've been told is the actual penny rate, 349, 841. So it adjusts down. And then we just took that and projected from that forward on the same projection that Mr. Meredith had used in his spreadsheet of 0.75 annual increase of that penny rate. So that is subject to change. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next is the additional items for consideration that I think Mr. Hale, or I think what Jennifer said, couldn't get on the agenda, so we've added them.
A lot of these things are, you know, in our workshop, what the board has expected. If we discuss it in the workshop and it ends up being able to be put in consent, you all have acted on those items. There's items we receive up to the board meeting, and some of them are purchases due to just the way the timing of them. These are purchase orders for purchases that we need to move forward with if the board will approve. As you can see, the purchase order TNTP is through grant funds. This is through our their professional development and learning support in our literacy work, and that's through grant funds. So that's also a purchase order for that payment. And we can take one at a time, or if you want me to just highlight all of them and you consider them.
This group.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just going to go down to item 9B. That's another TNTP. You also notice it's through the state, the money we got from the Tennessee State Department, the implementation grant funds. It's for the professional development support and implementation support. Item 9C, this is funds through a grant. Boones Creek requesting, because it's over $10,000, the item requires board approval. But if you don't know what a Gaga Ball pit is, it's basically this small fortress around, and students get inside there and they play a game.
And it will keep them busy for hours.
Right. Yeah. But that's being purchased through a grant, and as I said, even the grant funds are there, but it is over 10, so it requires board action. The next item, 9D, is same thing. This is through ESSER funds, and as you can see, it's a purchase from Gray Elementary School, physical activity. Item 9E same thing, but Grandview Elementary School, and it's utilizing ESSER II funds. And just as a note, you know, ESSER II funds have to be expended by June 30th. So we're getting to that point. And these are some of the last dollars as we close out that fund. Item 9F is special education through a grant. And then 9G, more special education funds through grants, expenditures for those services and materials.
Mr. Walters?
I make a motion that we approve all the purchase orders that Mr. Boyd just went through.
I'll second.
Second.
Discussion? Last vote, please, sir.
Cody second. All agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the one thing I didn't want to bring the attention to the board, I think most of you may know, but we had a retired teacher pass, Coach Snyder. He's 86, just, you know, like for the board and everyone, keep him, the family in prayers. What I was told, Oak Grove Baptist Church is where they'll have him on June 10th, but no time given, so. But please remember the family. But other than that, don't have nothing else unless somebody does.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.